These are the spiders in your house.
Hello YouTube. There are flashy, high-profile spiders like the widows and the recluses and the Sydney funnel webs that get a lot of attention. But the little brown jobbies, as even scientists sometimes call them, the generic-looking spiders that you find randomly in your kitchen, have their mind-boggling secrets too. This species and its close relatives occur just about everywhere really, so everyone is likely to run into one of them at some point. It could, sorta, if you don't look too close, be confused with a medically significant spider. It's pretty important as a pest control agent in our agricultural supply chain, and when it comes to mating, it's got some pretty bizarre stuff going on that'll make you wonder if spiders experience jealousy. This is Philodromus rufus, the white-striped running crab spider, today representing the family Philodromidae, or the running crab spiders. Also making an appearance will be Philodromus praelustris, the resplendent running crab spider, and Philodromus dispar, the Eurasian running crab spider. These can be pretty tricky to identify right down to the specific species, especially when they're alive, because they don't like to sit still under the microscope, and they never stay knocked out for very long.
And he's awake.
It's a lot easier when they're dead, but I didn't want to wait until all of these guys croaked to make this video. So, if you find one of these, don't feel bad if all you can tell is that it's some kind of running crab spider. Without putting it under a microscope, even many arachnologists wouldn't be able to get past Philodromus sp, leaving the ID at the genus level. The name running crab spider, of course, brings to mind crab spiders, but there are important differences between them, which we'll get into. Since this is a spider that commonly shows up in homes, I'm going to go through a series of questions that your average non-spider nerd will probably ask when they encounter one. Is it a brown recluse? If not, what is it, and how do I know that? Is its bite venomous? They might say poisonous, but we're just going to let that go. Do they like biting people? What do they like biting? Will it overrun my home with babies? And what can I expect from this spider? Of course, first I need to mention the people who made this video possible, so a big thank you to Dr. Catherine Scott, Dr. Sean McCann, Dr. Lenka Sentenska, and Kevin Weiner for various contributions both in research and in photos and the like. And of course, my wife, who edited this script several times and who is thus the only reason that what you're about to see isn't a total mess. If you want to see some of what went into researching and making this video and others, you can join my Patreon page and get a look behind the scenes at how all of this came together. And if you're enjoying the channel, Patreon is the very best way to support it, so go check that out. There will be a link below. And now, on with the questions. In my Brown Recluse video, I talked about all of the things that people have mistaken for it, and it gets truly ridiculous, as it seems that all something needs to be misidentified as a brown recluse is a generally brownish color and 8 legs. Sometimes not even that. But in this case, I can understand it, because not only does this spider check those basic boxes, it actually does have a couple of features that are a bit reclusey. First, like brown recluse, a fun but incorrect pluralization of recluse, running crab spiders don't build webs like orb weavers or cobweb weavers do. Both recluses and running crab spiders will usually be seen being dodgy right on a surface like a wall instead of being chill in a web. And the second feature is this stance. Here's a brown recluse and here's a running crab spider. Notice the position of these legs. In both spiders, the legs sort of bend backward and then forward, similar to a crab's legs, giving the running crab spider a silhouette that can look a lot like that of the brown recluse. This is what we call having latrograde legs, as opposed to prograde legs. The legs tend to be relatively long and skinny in both cases, and a lot of running crab spiders tend to be brownish. So, from a distance, at a glance, on a dark night and a fast horse, even a non-ridiculous person could suspect this spider of being a recluse. Thankfully, there are some easy giveaways that can tell us that it isn't a recluse. Recluses are all of those spiders that belong to the Loxosceles genus, and all of the Loxosceles species that occur in North America have plain, unmarked abdomens. Most running crab spiders have some kind of patterning on the abdomen, and so...
Patterns on the butt, it's not Loxosceles.
The whole song is in the Brown Recluse video. If you can get a closer look, a running crab spider will have 8 eyes arranged like this. 2 rows of 4, fairly widely spaced, and more or less all the same size, while the recluse has 6 eyes in 3 groups, which from a distance can usually be spotted as 3 dots on its face. Also requiring a fairly close look, we can see that running crab spiders usually have some spines on their legs, these thicker spikes that stand up like this, while recluse have no spines, just very fine hairs on their legs. So we can use those features, the patterned abdomen, the eyes, and the spiny legs, to be sure we're not looking at a recluse. You might need a magnifying glass or something, but nothing more than that. It's always easier to tell what something isn't than to tell what it is. Most of you can tell that this, for instance, isn't a stapler or a banana or a dog, but only a few of you will know what it actually is. So, what makes a running crab spider a running crab spider? Running crab spiders are their own family of spiders, the Philodromidae family. The bodies will be pretty flat, so overall this is kind of a pancake of a spider. A key detail we're looking for is this second pair of legs, which will be the longest, sometimes by a great deal. Legs 1, 3, and 4 will all be fairly similar in length, and all 4 pairs of legs will be similar in build. Make note of that. Overall, they have this sort of crab-like stance. Running crab spiders can look quite a bit like crab spiders, but despite the similarity in general appearance and in name, they're more different than you might think. Crab spiders are in the family Thomisidae. A crab spider's first 2 pairs of legs will be much more robust than their last 2, especially here at the femurs, while a running crab spider's legs are all about the same build. Crab spiders also tend to have faces that look right at you, with these outer eyes in the front row sitting atop these protrusions that make it look like they have angry eyebrows. The Xysticus genus of crab spiders are particularly grumpy looking. If there's a family of spiders with faces that say, "You kids get off my lawn!" it's the crab spiders. Running crab spiders don't have that forehead thingy. Perhaps the most interesting difference, though, is what determines how they move and where you find them. Crab spiders tend to be rather slow-moving and sort of clumsy, while running crab spiders are much faster and extremely agile. And you'll usually find crab spiders either hiding in the petals of flowers, in the case of flower hunting ones, or on the ground down in the dirt or the leaf litter, in the case of the ground crab spiders. Running crab spiders, though, will usually be found on vertical surfaces, in grass or on the stalks of vegetation. And this is largely due to these things on their legs called scopulae. These are tiny tufts made up of hairs that each have a whole bunch of more tinier hairs on them. And running crab spiders have tufts of these hairs with more hairs right by their claws on the end of each leg, called claw tufts. In 2012, Jonas Wolf and Stanislav Gorb took a close look at the claw tufts on Philodromus dispar here, using scanning electron microscopes. They found that each claw tuft had around 30 of these setae, or hairs, and each of those setae had between 600 and 1,000 setules, what the tinier broom-shaped hairs are called. So we're talking about each leg creating a potential 24,000 points of contact with whatever it's standing on. With 8 legs, that's 192,000 points of contact. And those tiny points of contact use molecular forces called van der Waals forces that act sort of like gravity or static electricity to stick the spider to what it's standing on. Andrew Martin from the Institute for Technical Zoology and Bionics in Bremen, Germany, described this as a weak attractive force between atoms or non-polar molecules caused by a temporary change in dipole moment arising from a brief shift of orbital electrons to one side of one atom or molecule, creating a similar shift in adjacent atoms or molecules. That quote came from this discussion of how spiders stick to smooth surfaces by W.G. Evans in the South African Journal of Dentistry. Whatever. Back to Wolf and Gorb, though. They wanted to know if the smoothness or roughness of a surface determined how well the spider could grip it. So they knocked out some spiders with CO2 and stuck one end of a human hair to their backs with a drop of wax, and the other to a sensor. Obviously. Then they had the spiders run away and try to pull on the hair while the sensor measured the amount of force they were able to generate. The spiders actually had the most grip on the smoothest surface, which generated the greatest amount of contact with each setule. And that's why you'll often find these guys in places like this. In your house, you'll spot these on the walls and the ceiling. I think they're actually uncomfortable when they're directly on the ground, because I don't often see them on the floor. The size of running crab spiders can vary. Here's my little white-striped running crab spider with our universally known objects for scale. And you can see, this is just not a large spider. This one, which I think is the resplendent running crab spider, is quite a bit bigger, with a leg span probably around an inch across. If it's much bigger than this, and you live in the southern US, you might be looking at a huntsman, which again looks similar, but the eyes are a bit different. What parts of the world will you find them in? Well, this is the iNaturalist data for the Philodromidae family. The Philodromus genus, which is one of the larger groups within that family, seems mostly restricted to the northern hemisphere. Philodromus dispar is mostly found across Europe and in western North America, though they've apparently been introduced here and there in the east, including here in Nova Scotia. Philodromus cespidum and Philodromus rufus, which are tricky to tell apart, occur in basically all of Europe and across North America. The resplendent running crab spider seems distinctly North American, with a lot fewer records than the rest. iNaturalist shows a handful in the United States, and the Global Biodiversity Information Facility shows quite a few fairly far north in Canada. So, Northern Hemisphere folks are just about guaranteed to come across some flavor of running crab spider at some point. Of course, the question in the mind of your average person who finds one of these in their house is it venomous? As usual, yes, it's venomous, because that's generally how spiders work. But not in any way that's going to be dangerous to you. I scoured the internet, but I could only find one documented case of a bite by a running crab spider, and this one came out of South Africa. A 25-year-old woman pinched one accidentally while taking laundry off the line and got bitten on her thumb. From the sound of the report, it wasn't any fun and it hurt quite a bit, but ultimately it resulted in some blisters on the thumb that resolved themselves within a few days. On the one hand, you might be thinking, well, Travis, that means we really have no idea what the bite does. It could be terrible. Which is sorta true, technically, I guess. But when a spider is this common and lives so closely with humans, statistically it's likely that bites happen on a somewhat regular basis. Not because these spiders are aggressive, which we'll explore in a minute here, but just because they're so common, and like most spiders, if they get squeezed or pinched, which probably happens often, they may bite defensively. The fact that there are next to no records indicates that those bites that are probably happening aren't resulting in anything that needs a doctor, so nobody reports it. The fact that this is the only case I could find in the literature suggests that this might more or less be the worst case scenario. And in reality, the bites might not be that common. My research suggests that these are not aggressive spiders. What research, you say? I'm so glad you asked. For the newcomers to the channel, I'll start by saying that in science, some days you're Temperance Brennan, some days you're MacGyver. Depends what you're trying to study, where you are at the time, and what you've got available. And one day I wanted to know how readily a spider would bite. I was in my basement, and I had my kid's Meccano set and some cheese, which is soft enough for a spider to bite, but still kinda solid like flesh. And I thought if I attached the cheese to the camera, I could just poke the spider with the cheese and the camera would catch everything nice and close up. It's sort of a defensiveness test, to see if the spider will stand its ground and bite. I used to say I was testing aggression, but it was pointed out that a spider resorting to violence after being unrelentingly assaulted by a piece of old cheddar in a totally uncalled for way could hardly be called aggression. In this test, cheese is going to play a real stupid game, and it's its own stupid fault if it wins a real stupid prize. I've used this test with the yellow sac spider, the eastern parson spider, the rustic wolf spider, the giant house spider, the barn frontal weaver, and the hobo spider. For those who might question the validity of this test, I have had a spider bite the cheese. It was a yellow sac spider. And a hobo spider named Talia gave it a pretty good toothy warning. So let's see how these two male philodromids do with it. We'll call this one Cody. Okay. 2, 3, go. We are recording on the Pentax. Let's see if I can get him off here first. Seems to want to hide. Oh, no, I don't want to crush you. Whoa! Holy crap! Whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Whoa! Does run out of breath. Not seeing any signs of a bite here. Can't go where I can't get you. Just retreating. Here we go with Matt, and the Pentax is recording. There we go. Oh, oh, okay. No, 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 this way. Oh my goodness, getting the spider to... No. Does not look like a spider that wants a fight. Okay, I think we've harassed Matt enough. Really no interest in biting here, even after sustained harassment. So this is definitely not an animal that's going to wake up in the morning, choose violence, and chase you down the hall to bite you. It's much more afraid of you than you are of it. Now, I've realized that I do very little handling of spiders on this channel, and Spencer's going to start making fun of me for it soon. So here's how it went when I found this little white-striped running crab spider out and about one day. It seemed curious, or maybe a little panicked, and it probably thought my warm skin felt weird and gross, but as far as it was concerned, I was just something to walk on, not food. A spider's venom is not for malice. They didn't evolve venom out of spite, it turns out. It's to procure food. And the spider knows I'm not food. It won't waste its venom on me if it's not feeling threatened. It actually takes the spider a lot of energy and nutrients to make that venom. So this is not a spider you need to worry about at all. This is not to say that these spiders are not fierce predators. These are incredibly quick spiders. Watch this one hit this fruit fly on its way by. Let's slow that down to half speed. Here's one going after a small cricket. This is slowed all the way down to 1/20th speed. The spider is able to coordinate all of those limbs incredibly well, incredibly quickly. At full speed, it looks like this. Here's another one punching a fruit fly's ticket, again at 1/20th speed. She strikes with incredible precision. That fruit fly didn't have a chance. And this hunting prowess makes these spiders especially useful to us, particularly in fruit orchards. In August of 1999, David Horton and a team of researchers placed cardboard bands around pear and apple trees in 3 different orchards in central Washington, then collected the bands in January to see what spiders were overwintering in them. At one of the sites, Philodromus cespidum, the turf running crab spider, accounted for 81% of all the spiders found. A study back in 1980 by McCaffrey and Horsberg, mostly done by just smacking the branches of trees and seeing what spiders fell out of them, found that running crab spiders were the second most abundant kind of spiders in orchards in Virginia. Here's Dr. Catherine Scott showing how that's done, by the way. I'll go into it more on Patreon. And in 1997, Joanna Wisniewska and Ronald Prokopi stuck some running crab spiders in cups with a leaf and some rose leafhoppers, which are prominent pests in apple orchards that do a lot of damage to apple crops. By carefully examining the dead leafhoppers, they confirmed that running crab spiders will readily prey on them, thus controlling their populations. They tried the same thing with whole branches encased in fine nets, and got the same result. In the Czech Republic, in 2014, Radek Michalko and Stano Pekar tested Philodromus spiders out with a bunch of invertebrates common in European orchards, and found that they preyed mostly on the pest species. And a study in 2010 found that running crab spiders remained active even through the winter. By capturing and testing the spiders at various temperatures, they found that they would capture prey at temperatures as low as 1.2 degrees Celsius, or about 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So, running crab spiders, particularly Philodromus cespidum and Philodromus rufus, are important control agents in the fruit crops we rely on, and can reduce our dependence on chemical pesticides. With no web, how do running crab spiders hunt their prey? Things get a little foggy here, and if you Google this, you might find some conflicting information. Most sources will tell you that these spiders hunt mostly by touch and feeling vibrations, but some will say that they are also visual hunters with moderately good eyesight. But I couldn't find any actual studies that had tested the eyesight of running crab spiders, so I wasn't sure where they were getting this. This was one of several things I asked about in an email to Dr. Lenka Sentenska, a Czech arachnologist who has done a lot of work with these spiders. And she wasn't aware of any studies that had specifically tested their eyesight either. She also noted that in all of her time working with them, she couldn't recall ever getting the impression that they relied strongly on visual information, and that they mostly had to feel their way through life. Let's have a quick look at some of what I saw while I was observing and filming them. She keeps running away. Yeah, that tracks. So, where did the idea that they have good eyesight come from? Well, I don't know for sure, but here's my guess, which nobody should take as counting for too much, it was just a thought that occurred to me. Back in 1934, Heinrich Hohmann had done a ton of research on spider eyes, and he determined that crab spiders had fairly good vision, and by crab spiders, he meant the Thomisidae family. But in 1934, everything we now consider part of the Philodromidae family was classed as Thomisidae. Crab spiders and running crab spiders were regarded as all the same family. So perhaps it was presumed that if the thomisids he was testing were found to have decent eyesight, running crab spiders must too. But I think there might be a difference. Watch how this Xysticus, a thomicid, reacts to my finger as I harass her with no good excuse to do so. This looks like the motion of a spider tracking something visually. But we don't see the same behavior from Philodromids, the running crab spiders. Cool. So there's good reason to think that this long-held belief is probably incorrect. Occasionally, good science like Hohmann's can produce the odd incorrect conclusion, so bits and pieces of flawed science were actually around even before we had Google's AI search results summary. But when it comes to understanding the eight-legged creatures that we share our homes with, less wronger, is more better. So, lucky for us, human scientists tend to eventually find these errors and correct them. I suspect that running crab spiders rely on their other senses to detect and locate prey, and this is where spider senses get pretty wild. Spiders in general are extremely sensitive to vibrations, and those vibrations can either be airborne, like sound waves of your boss's voice as they make that pointless meeting take longer than it needs to, or substrate-borne, like the feeling you get through the floor when your coworker next to you starts tapping their feet in quiet fury about it. To sense these different vibrations, they have 3 specialized structures: tactile hairs, trichobothria, and slit sensili. These structures are actually common to all spiders and deserve a video of their own, because if I try to get into the methodology and history of the research on all of these, we are going to be here all day, so I'm going to skip to the highlights. First, tactile hairs are long, slender hairs that sit in a socket that works in one direction, like this Lego piece. These are most of the hairs that you see on a spider's legs. They're attached to nerves, but generally need to contact something for the spider to feel it, so these are the touch sensors. Next, we have these very special hairs called trichobothria. There are a lot fewer of these, and they usually occur in a single row or in little clumps down the length of the spider's legs, and in the case of Philodromus, there might be 20 to 40 of them per leg. The number and arrangement of trichobothria is constant within a species, and can actually be an aid to species-level identification, if you've got the equipment to actually see them. These very fine hairs are supported by a membrane in a socket that allows movement in all directions, kind of like a joystick, and the nerves attached to the base of the hair, which has a structure called a helmet, can detect movement from any direction. This is where it gets kind of wild. The sensitivity of these hairs is mind-blowing. An air current moving as slowly as 1 millimeter per second is enough to deflect these hairs and thus for the spider to detect. That's an air current moving at roughly the same speed as the tip of the second hand on a wristwatch. And about half the average speed of a Pacific banana slug. This is kind of like having both super acute hearing and a hypersensitive motion detector. Peter Parker's spidey sense was kind of based on the abilities of these trichobothria, allowing him to sense moving objects nearby without needing to see them. So think of trichobothria as the spidey sense hairs. The last sensory organ is the slit sensili. These are little slits in the exoskeleton, spanned by a membrane with a nerve attached to it. Vibrations through the substrate, or the surface the spider is standing on, stress the exoskeleton enough to flex these slits in a way the spider can feel. And spiders can have thousands of these over their entire body, mostly on the legs. When you combine touch-sensitive hairs, motion-sensitive hairs, and vibration-sensing slits, even totally blind spiders can not only detect but accurately locate a buzzing insect as much as a foot away. Add a bit of sight into that, and you've got an extremely capable hunter that's going to do a great job taking care of pests in your home. But Travis, you say, if this thing has babies, won't I have more spiders than pests? And that brings us to how these spiders reproduce. In answer to your question, no, this spider isn't likely to take over your house. As predators, they only stick around if there's enough food, so if you have enough spiders to really be a problem, then you almost definitely have a different, bigger problem. Philodromus rufus here usually produces between 40 and 60 eggs in an egg sac, which is actually on the low side as spiders go, but mortality in baby spiders is abysmally high, usually upwards of 95%. In most environments, most of the spiderlings die to dehydration, starvation, or predation, including getting eaten by each other. As always, there are some intricacies to the mating habits of these spiders. Here in Nova Scotia, Philodromus rufus mating occurs around June, with spiderlings hatching in late July. That timeline might shift as you go further south, but it'll be around there. Those spiderlings will overwinter as juveniles, then grow through the spring, summer, and fall of the following year, overwinter again, then mature the following spring, reproduce, and die shortly after. so these have roughly a 2-year lifespan. In the eastern half of North America, there seems to be a couple of different varieties of this species. In one of those varieties, the males vibrate their legs during courtship, and in the other they don't. It looks like I have the vibrating variety. Look what this male started doing when I put him in a mature female's enclosure. Look at these legs. Look how quickly and crazily he's tapping them. Now watch it at 1/20th speed, and it's clear that he's doing this on purpose. He's got a system. And Philodromus cespidum, which looks very much like just a larger version of Philodromus rufus, displays a remarkable mating behavior, the use of mating plugs. Now, generally, a female of this species will accept and mate with the first male she encounters after reaching maturity, because she has no way of knowing whether she'll meet any other man ever again. The world's a dangerous place when you're 4 millimeters long. But these spiders are polyandrous. The female can and will mate with more than one male. Of course, the male wants the female to have his kids, not some other guy's, but he can't stick around and guard her. So he has another trick up his sleeve. First, just like all spiders, he deposits a drop of his sperm from his abdomen onto a silk sheet. Then he pulls some of that sperm into his pedipalps, the little arm-like things up by his face that act kind of like little syringes. After tapping the female's legs with his own to announce his intentions, the female eventually lets him climb on top of her. Then he reaches around and inserts a part of each of his pedipalps, called the embolus, into each of the female's genital openings. Yes, she has 2 of them. Now, some spiders do this amazing and deeply horrifying thing where the male actually breaks off a part of his own genitalia inside the female to prevent other males from mating with her. Looking at you, Black Widow. These spiders are just as petty, but not quite as brutal. Instead of breaking off a part of his own genitals, the male secretes a substance into and over the opening, which then hardens into a plug, blocking it off from other males. The female can still lay eggs when the time comes because she's actually got yet another reproductive opening for that. This is really the most the guy can do, and at some point the female decides she's done with mating and shakes him off of her. Now, most of the time, the plug covers both copulatory openings, but sometimes it only covers one, and occasionally it covers neither. And it's unclear whether that's due to the male being unable to produce a large enough plug, or whether the female, who really is the one who decides when mating is over, is deliberately limiting how effective a plug he can leave. It's possible she's keeping her options open in hopes that a better mate might come along. Even if the male plugs both openings, though, he's still not guaranteed to be the winning dad. In 2018, Lenka Sentenska, Stano Pekar, and Gabriel Uhl published a study out of the Czech Republic that examined exactly how all of this was happening. They measured a bunch of these spiders, let them mate, then knocked the females out with CO2, and examined the mating plugs left behind by the males. Then they gave the females the chance to mate again. While all of the females were aggressive toward this second batch of males, they all eventually allowed them to mount and try to mate. And about half of the time, these new males were able to remove most or all of the plug left behind by the first guy. And interestingly, the males who successfully did this were most often bigger than their predecessors. Sentenska points out in her paper that the first mating usually happens quickly, and the female doesn't spend a lot of time assessing the male's quality. But the second male needs to spend more time removing the plug, giving the female a lot more time to evaluate him and make up her mind. She's got plenty of time to reject him and shake him off if he's a lesser man than her first. If that's really what's going on here, and we're not sure that it isn't, then it would require a kind of memory on the part of the female to compare the new guy to the last guy, which would be pretty remarkable. It's also possible, though, that bigger males are just better at removing plugs. We don't actually know which it is yet. We don't know how the females are evaluating the males exactly. We're also not really sure just how the male scrapes the plug away, since it's a tough thing to see while the spiders are mating, but he seems to do it with some part of his palps. Despite this ability to remove plugs, males would prefer to mate with a female who doesn't have one at all. And if that's not an option, they'd prefer one with a smaller plug rather than a larger one. And incredibly, the males are able not only to find these females, but gain information about whether she has a plug, as well as how big and effective that plug is, just by following her silk dragline. In 2019, Lenka Sentenska and Stano Pekar set up a little Y-shaped corridor and gave male spiders, again Philodromus cespetum, some choices. They found that given the choice between the silk of an unmated but mature female and the silk of a juvenile, the males clearly preferred to hang out with the silk from the adult female. And when given the choice between the silk of an unmated female and one that had mated, they gravitated toward the silk of the unmated one. Sentenska and Pekar went a step further though, and they gave the male spiders the choice between the silk of a mated female with only a small mating plug and silk from a female with a large mating plug that covered both openings. And amazingly, the males could tell the difference, much preferring the silk of the female with the smaller, less effective plug. So there's a lot of information in the chemical cues that female spiders leave in their silk draglines. The size of their plug is somehow encoded into the signals in their silk, and the males are smart enough to decode it. What can you expect from this spider then, if you've got it in your house? What is living with this spider going to be like? We've got what we need to figure out the 3 measures of house spider politeness: webs, movement, and bitiness. So let's address those. Webs. That's a non-issue with this spider. Being active hunters, running crab spiders don't make webs to capture prey. They really only use silk for safety in their drag lines and for making egg sacs, so they're not going to be making messy cobwebs like these guys, or little sleeping bags in your corners like these guys. Very tidy, considerate spiders in this regard. Movement. Is this a spider that's going to show up and surprise you, or will it stay in one place? Running crab spiders score less well on this. In fact, in this regard, these might be some of the worst offenders. They don't stick to one corner or a web, and they don't wait for nighttime to come out and wander. So this is a spider that's going to suddenly appear on your wall or ceiling while you're eating toast in the morning or quietly binging that shameful reality show you don't want your spouse to know you love. That makes the running crab spider about as rude as they come on the movement score. And bitiness? I'd say full marks here, as this really is not an aggressive spider, and even if a bite occurs, all the evidence we've got, which is honestly more of a lack of evidence, would suggest that it's not going to be a big deal. Overall, running crab spiders are pretty easy spiders to live with, if you're comfortable with small spiders just appearing at random occasionally. And that, my friends, is a look at running crab spiders. There are, of course, many more species in this family beyond the few that I've touched on here, but the ones that I've mentioned provide a good general picture of what you can expect from any of them. If you find one of these in your house, you can feel pretty good about it. Odds are it's just running around on the walls or ceiling, catching little prey insects that you didn't even know were there. And out there, they're protecting the food supply we all rely on. So, in general, these barely ever mentioned spiders are fantastic friends and neighbors, and I hope all of this has helped you understand why. If you want to see some of what went into the making of this and other videos, as well as more of my day-to-day spider encounters, or if you just want to support this channel, head over to my Patreon. There's behind-the-scenes stuff, experimental stuff, and additional content that gives you a close-up view of how I do what I do, as well as some of the random bits of research I come across that don't fit into the videos. The extended version of the pairing attempt in this video is over there, as well as a lot of stories about the spiders I'm keeping at any given moment. And Patreon is the very best way to support this channel. A big thank you to all of my current patrons. You folks really do a ton to keep this channel going, and I can't stress enough how much I appreciate your support. You can also head over to my Shopify store and get yourself some awesome merch. For those who are fans of the very first cheese test, the moment is captured and represented on these shirts and mugs. And scientists, accountants, pharmacists, and tattoo artists will appreciate these shirts and mugs. This helps support the channel too, and a big thank you to all of you who have supported by purchasing already. And for random stuff, you can follow me over on Blue Sky, which is where all the cool people from Twitter ended up. Of course, just watching this video supports me as well, and that's the backbone of the whole thing. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned something about this spider in your house, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers.